Welcome everyone to this day of celebrating the United Nations. The United Nations had the birthday on Saturday, actually, 75 years old, or young, it depends. But anyway, it's really something to celebrate. This United Nations is very important for us, and we all feel it these days that we're kind of a part of a world. I mean, with the corona pandemic, it's different than it used to be. And of course, it is a challenge for all of us. But then again, it's good to have an association that brings the different countries together. So that's why the University of Bergen would like to mark out this day. And what we would like to do is to and also to show that we have PhD candidates at the University of Bergen who actually work on very important global issues. So we will have several presentations today with examples from this. It was very strange to plan this meeting because we didn't know really if we were able to have the arrangement or not because of the corona. I mean, one day it was we were allowed to have 0 people in the audience. The second day, 200, then 50, and so on. So we didn't really know how many to invite. So we invited a very small group, and I see that most of you are here, and that's very nice. And also, we decided to stream the meeting, so other people who are not in this room also can attend and listen to the presentations. Then I think we can start with the first part of the program, which is that we will have a guest. The university has a guest, and that is Kai Grieg, who is an advisor at the United Nations Association of Norway, or in Norwegian we say FN-sambandet, in the office here in Bergen. And we're very happy that you could come here, Kai. And we would like to hear from you a little bit about the United Nations. And we have also asked the student here, Hibak Mohammed. She will also come and join in this to discuss with you a little bit, to ask you questions if needed. So maybe you both should come forward, please.
Thank you.
Yeah. I suggest that you can just stand here.
Well, as Bente said, Kai is a guest. Sorry. Kai is a guest and I'm a student, so we're both outsiders. And we're just going to have an informal conversation about the UN and put up the frames for the conversations today, hopefully. So Kai, do you want to tell us shortly about what the UN is?
That's a very nice question, very broad one. I like to put it as a picture, an illustration. The UN is an elephant. And by that, I mean 2 things. The first thing is that the UN is very huge. And if UN decides to reach on the other side of the valley, this elephant will cross the valley, trees will crack over, there will be a lot of noise, but the elephant will manage to reach the other side. And the other side of that is that I worked with peacekeeping operations at the UN, and I think I know the UN, but I should remember, like an elephant, I only know the trunk, or a leg, or the tail, and the UN is huge.
Yeah, because the other, sorry for interrupting, here the other day he showed me a picture of an elephant and a lot of people just grabbing the different sides of the elephant. And with the illustration of the UN as this animal is quite nice because everyone sees it in different ways. If I were to describe the UN, it would mean something else for me than it was for you.
And the part to bring on is that all these different descriptions of the UN are true. So I've been in the field, far away from head office, I saw one part of the UN while there, and it's also true, but it's of course not the whole of United Nations.
That's true. And I think that the main goal for the UN, which a lot of people see, is peacekeeping. And that's the whole start of the organization from 1945. But today, we're gathered here to talk about the SDGs. And what do you think is the natural cause of that? The UN reaching outward, just not focusing on peacekeeping, but also the sustainability goals.
So I could add that this elephant is a very smart elephant. So it develops. When times are changing, the elephant is changing as well. But still, when we look back to when the UN was formed, the main purpose was, of course, peace, as you said. But also in the founding paper, FN-traktaten, it is put up, it works for human progress. And that is, of course, what we call utvikling and development work. So it was already there. But I think it's right to say now the UN covers so many things. My daily job is to go around to schools and I ask pupils, can you mention one thing the UN is not involved in? And very often, all the suggestions we find out UN is involved in it.
Yeah.
So UN is involved in so many things, and even more so with the SDGs, of course.
I think it's really nice what you said, that the UN is a really great part of our daily lives. And as we're now standing here in one of the faculties, what do you think that the University in Bergen, the challenges that the University of Bergen has when it comes to the SDGs? What work do we have to do? Which challenges are we heading on in this exciting time?
So yeah, I'm very happy that the University of Bergen has decided to put the SDGs as like a working platform. Can I just give a small description of the SDGs?
Yeah, elaborate.
Yeah. So, of course, you've all seen the poster with the 17 goals. And under these 17 goals, there are 169 targets. And the way this document came to life is that there is an idea that if you are specific enough and you make politicians agree on something, it's more likely it will happen.
Yes.
And the last part of this is, of course, the indicators. So all 194 countries has agreed on reporting on 232 indicators. So in a way, it's 19,000 numbers each year. So the system is that if you report how many people, how many mothers die during giving birth, you will also do something with it. If the numbers is going up, you should know why it's going up. If it's going down, maybe other countries can learn from you. So that is the basic in it. And we are 5 years into these 15 years, and most countries hasn't given numbers yet. So it's a very fragile system.
So we need to look more into the research then, collecting it.
Some parts you need more research, but it's basically for the government to just say we will do it. Like a country like Norway, we have capacity to deliver on the figures. But a lot of these figures are, of course, very political. Starting just with the first one on poverty, when we talk about child poverty in Norway, child poverty in Norway is defined as children living in families under the national poverty line. And the figure in Norway is 0, you could say, because we don't have a poverty line. So we need the government to decide on the poverty line.
So working together then on finding the poverty line, for example.
Or just to decide on the same as the rest of Europe is using.
Okay.
But of course, then you will have a very strong figure that will lead to political consequences, very likely. Because as we all know, if you count something, it's sort of more important than those things that you don't count. And that is, of course, the weak part of this. You have a figure, a number is going up, it's good, but the data is so bad, but still you will believe it's going in the right direction.
It's very interesting, but I think Now we're going towards a really big picture, and maybe that's the thing that we can agree on, that this isn't really an easy topic to talk about, that we have a lot of things to discuss, to watch, to agree on, and maybe just sum it up there.
So for me, I think you asked me about the university.
Yeah.
And I think from my point of view, standing outside the university, I think it's important for the university to support the system, to support Norway to get the figures out and support what is actually in the text.
Okay.
So can I give an example?
Yes.
Yeah. For example, in the Sdgs on life below water, it is said that all countries with a coastal line should protect 10% of their coastal areas. And Norway is below 1% of protected ocean areas. I think university should be in the forefront of saying, well, let's just do it. These are the most important areas to protect.
But is that the university's task? Or isn't it more of a, because from my point of view, I see the university as a place where we do research, where we collect data, where we talk together, and then we put this, figuratively speaking, on a desk for someone to make the bigger decisions, so that they can take what we have researched and then make the right decisions based on that. So I don't disagree with you, but I don't agree either. I think that the university's role, again, just speaking as students, should be collecting information, doing good research, because that's what we're good at, and then getting that out.
So that is the three main purposes of universities: is research, education, and public outreach. And of course, if you are the one person sitting on the information, what are the most biological important ocean areas? Of course, you should be one person saying, when we are protecting ocean areas, we should include areas of all these kinds. Who else should do it, if not the experts? And the experts are here.
Well, then I agree with you. Well, I think that me and Kai have shared enough thoughts with you, and I hope we have set some good frames. And yeah, thank you for listening to us.
So since it's a birthday party today, United Nations is 75 years old, and you have made the effort to come here. I have a present for you all. I have a tag like this, and it's historical. It's my organization is also 75 years old next year, and this tag is at least 50 years old. So all of you can pick up one when you are leaving today. So thank you a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much. Maybe you can stay for just 5 minutes and we'll see if someone has any comments to you. It's wonderful to have a birthday where we get the presents ourselves. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. So we will look at this afterwards. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. But are there any comments from the audience or questions regarding the United Nations?
If you have any, fire away.
I have one question, and that is, since a United Nations now is 75 years old, and you've been working, I don't know how long, for
14 years in this position.
Yeah. Have you seen any change actually in the organization these years?
Well, the SDGs is a huge change.
Yeah.
And if you see the area of human rights, it was like rich countries criticizing poor countries, and sort of, you are doing the wrong thing, you should behave better.
Yeah.
But now the whole, both human rights system, climate, and also this has changed to a system when everyone is supposed to do their best.
Yeah.
So you promise to make more research paper next year. You put up a number, and next year you report on how many research papers you made. So it's a voluntary system. And it's more people-friendly in a way, less criticism, more of let's do this together. So it's a huge change.
Oh, that's good. Very interesting to hear. Yeah, I understand that it's changing when you have this different way of phrasing the goals. Yeah. exactly. Yeah. And for you, Hiba, she's a law student. I didn't say that in the beginning, but she's a law student.
Yeah.
In your, when you're having your education here, do people talk about sustainable development goals?
I think that in a way, indirectly, we're talking about it. For me, when I got this job, I started to talk a lot more about it with my friends. And we see it at school that the information is getting better. The subject that you can choose on fifth year when you're writing your master's thesis have more with sustainability to do. And I think that's a direct consequence with the sustainability goals being more in the forefront when it comes to the university's work. So you're asked a yes/no question, but it's much more than that, because I think that people are talking about it. I just don't think that they know that they are talking about it. They're talking about sustainabilities. They're talking about goals. They're talking about numbers and the year 2030, for example, when it comes to the university, but they don't exactly know that it's because of the SDGs. You just know it's important. So yes, they're talking more about it. That's the answer.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. The reason why I asked her is that University of Bergen, we try to become a SDG university, the SDG university in Norway. Yeah, maybe we should improve a little bit more.
Maybe, but at the same time, I think that we've done a lot of things to get better.
Yeah.
I see changes from when I started. I study at this faculty, and I see changes just within the last 2 years. For example, the first year, the heat in in not the classrooms, but the place where we read was a lot much warmer in the wintertime. But now they've changed their systems. The light would always be on. So if you went from school at 9 o'clock in the evening, it would be bright, but now they close, so you have sensors. Just the little changes. So we should always try to get better, but I think we've done a lot of improvement just the last years.
Okay. Then I hope we go in the correct direction. Okay, thank you very much. We'll continue in the program, and we will actually present to you 4 projects which are of major global importance, I would say, and we are particularly proud of them. It will be 3 PhD candidates, which are listed on the slide, and we will have 1 supervisor who tells about the 4th project also. And I have to tell you something about the background for these candidates. It's because the University of Bergen, we have a strategy or priority area, which is called Global Challenges. The university actually have three priority areas. It's climate, and it's marine and energy, and then it's global challenges. And we are a group who are responsible for the global challenges, and we try to do things that makes the University of Bergen concentrate on certain of these global issues in the world when it comes to research and education and so on. So we have kind of persuaded the university administration to give funding to some PhD scholarships. And we are giving out 2 new global scholarships every year. And there are also 2 in marine and 2 in climate. And we try to choose the candidates to be the ones who have a project which is interdisciplinary and will have a special global angle. So we will hear these examples today. So I suggest that we just start with the first one, and that is Mulu Beyane Kind Anne Mariam, and he is from the Faculty of Law, and he will tell what his project is. But the point is that you will have about 10 minutes, I said to you, I think, to present. And then I suggest that the audience prepare for at least 1 or 2 comments to you and to each of the candidates. And if you don't have any other questions, you could consider, has this candidate a project which concerns any of the Sustainable Development Goals? And we'll ask you that. But okay, the first one, it is Mulu with this project. Please come forward. Yeah. Accountability for preventable maternal mortality in Ethiopia. And while he's coming up, you can see the different supervisors and environments, scientific environments that you belong to in this project. Yeah? You can use this one.
Yes. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Well, as you could see, the study tries to be interdisciplinary. If I have to put it briefly, it would be a legal study into a public health strategy employed in a setting that involves lots of ethical and priority, health, ethical and priority issues in Ethiopia. Well, in case some of you might not know the setting of the study, Ethiopia, it's an East African country, a federal structure with huge population, more than 100 million population. Well, the last census we had was 12 years back, actually, so we don't really have a good data. One of the least developed countries with high mortality rates. Life expectancy, for instance, as an indicator, stands at around 64 years, with 73 or 2/3 of women giving birth at home. So it's in this setting that I intend to do the research. The background, I think, introducing the background would do a better job to highlighting what I intend to do. So close to 300,000 women die yearly in relation to pregnancy, giving birth, as well as complications after birth, maternal deaths. More than 80% of this, according to many research, is preventable if a good system is put in place, even in very poor countries, basically. Some countries have done it. The estimation in Ethiopia, for instance, is that more than 10,000 women die in relation to giving birth, in relation to pregnancy, every year. So the maternal mortality ratio stands at 400, which is 400 women on average would die from 100,000 live births. You can compare with Europe, for instance, which stands at around 7. This is the biggest kind of discrepancy, actually, in metrics on various health amongst various health indicators, actually. Well, this is only an estimation because in Ethiopia we don't have a good functional civil registration system, and that is problematic in many ways. Among others, it does not give the challenge, the problem, the visibility, the attention that it deserves, which would drive action. Since it doesn't give you, estimations do not give you disaggregated data, you wouldn't understand who is most affected and why. Why are moms dying? Which interventions work and which does not, as it has been indicated by the earlier speaker. As a result, you cannot put a workable means of accountability, ways of addressing challenge when things go wrong. As a result, the UN, for instance, in 2010, the reduction of maternal mortality has been one of the goals in the Millennium Development Goals and continues to be in the Sustainable Development Goals as well. It's one of the least achieved Millennium Development Goals, actually. As a result, the Secretary General established a commission on information and accountability on women and children's health due to the understanding that this area was least achieved. So one of the findings was that a system of accountability is not working in many countries. Moms die, children are dying. The progress is not as expected, but nothing is happening as a result. And an explanation for this was the fact that there is lack of genuine data in many countries, basically. And therefore, according to the recommendations of the Commission, the WHO, World Health Organization, which is, as you know, the specialized agency of the UN, introduced what's called the Maternal Day Surveillance and Response System, which is a cycle of events, a cycle of activities that continuously tries to identify every single day, tries to establish why and degree of preventability, so as to provide a response to it. By so doing, it aims to produce genuine data for policy and decision-making, what is called the evidence-based decision-making. It hopes to provide a venue where health workers, most importantly, will learn in a safe environment from their mistakes and correct. And most importantly, to introduce a way of accountability in the health system, for the health system to be respondent to difficulties. And in Ethiopia, it was introduced immediately, given the gap. But assessments so far in Ethiopia in the last 7 years show that the uptake is very low. It's only around 10% of the estimations that is being captured through this system. And the way it's being implemented actually shows that it's becoming counterproductive in some angles. The indicators include that the system is becoming very punitive, that it focuses in making health workers liable for the failure of the health system. So many health workers are being accused, are being brought to the courts, most importantly, judicial way of accountability, even if the whole system was meant to find out systemic failures and to respond accordingly. At the bottom of all, according to the few research done, is that there is a lack of necessary legal protection that balances the different interests, that gives health workers the necessary safer environment to produce genuine data while doing their jobs. Well, it's with this background that this project wants to study the legal environment under which MDSR applies and what to do about it, basically. So it has specified the following objectives. First, I want to identify the impediments, what really is happening in implementing the MDSR, how is the law actually responding to it, to what extent are the laws regulating concerns of the health workers and others. It's not only the interest of the workers actually that needs to be addressed. There are many interests involved. So the education of the Ethiopian legal system in terms of forging a workable accountability, system of accountability. And I would also like to inquire into the potential that human rights system accountability can play with regard to addressing the challenge that this early research show. In terms of the sustainable developments, I would say that it would mainly relate to goal 3.1 in the third sustainable goals, which had the aim of decreasing the maternal days ratio to less than 70 per 100,000 birth lives by 2080 by, among others, developing an effective, accountable, and transparent institutions at all levels in the health system in Ethiopia. As an interdisciplinary kind of study, it will anchor on establishing laws, what is regulated and what is not, its sufficiency through the dogmatic legal study, but it would also gain through public health methods. Qualitative data would be acquired to address some of these issues. That's what I plan to do in the next 4 years. Thank you. That's basically it. Questions are welcome.
Thank you, Mulu. I think there are some comments in the audience, so we'll do it that I repeat your question, so yeah, in case I don't hear it in the recording system. Yeah, Astrid Blystad.
Yes, so I wonder, to what extent does the Ethiopian government realize that having these punitive measures against health personnel, that is simply somehow counterproductive if you really want people health personnel to answer honestly and say that here we had a maternal death. If they want health personnel to answer honestly, to what extent do they realize that having punitive measures where they actually would throw gynecologists into prison, which is actually happening, that simply would not work? It seems like that punitive system is one of the true bottlenecks. And is this up for discussion?
Mm-hmm. So this concerns the Ethiopian government and what they think about your kind of work. I think we can shorten it to that.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, we have no idea how, like the level of understanding in the health authorities. What is clear is that there has not been discussions, policy documents, legal mechanisms, for instance, put in place to address this. As a matter of fact, the political situation in Ethiopia favors a fabricated data to show that the system is working while it does not actually. There is a conflict between health workers trying to produce genuine data, at the same time trying to protect themselves, and at the same time the government, the authorities, beginning from facility managers, hospital managers, wanting to show positive results because the political system encourages such non-genuine, basically, data. So the whole political system does not favor. That's why, well, I want to show through empirical data, which would come through the public health aspect of the study, how things are and what can be done to address them, basically.
Yeah, very satisfied with this, Astrid. Okay, thank you very much. Good answer. Björn Bertelsen from Faculty of Social Science. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting presentation and very interesting project. And perhaps following up a bit on what Astrid asked, there is in your presentation of your project this notion of accountability, yeah? And this of course rings a bell for everyone who's worked in any system anywhere these days related to new public management, and that means transparency, etc., etc. But working with SDGs, especially in the global south, but also the global north, we face very many distinct socio-cultural systems, you could say, of what is accountability, what is, you have different legal systems, etc., etc. So what would your take on this be? I mean, do we need to pluralize what we mean by accountability?
It's difficult to summarize this, but accountability.
Yes.
Accountability.
Yes, I think it will be part of the study. As you said, there are different understandings of what accountability means. Actually, punishing health workers is considered as ensuring accountability in a way by the government. So clarifying what accountability means and how it should be understood in the health system in terms of advancing maternal health. I thought the way a human rights-based accountability system is anchored would be very, very fitting. So clarifying the different understandings, scrutinizing what is workable in relation to the duties of states to ensure rights. In this case, maternal rights would be a contribution, I thought, but I fully note the difficulty, the methodological difficulty of clarifying how accountability should be understood. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I have a question too.
Please.
That's a really horrible question for a PhD candidate. And that is what will you actually do? I mean, will you look at document or will you study the law or what will you do?
Okay, well, it would compose both acquiring empirical data in terms of finding out what concerns the different actors have, that different actors involved in the MDSR. So this would involve case analysis, if there are cases, interviews with key informants amongst the different health in the health system, not only with health workers but also administrators, politicians, civil societies that can play a role in bringing about accountability in the health system, but also a clear dogmatic study in law that tries to establish what existing laws are, what they should look like to address a particular challenge. So it would compose a mix of legal and empirical qualitative data through selected methods in the public health area, professionals.
Yeah. Okay. It sounds very interesting. You know, your main supervisor is from the Faculty of Law. So, I come from the Faculty of Medicine, and here we see law and medicine very close together. It's very interesting, and it's a very strength that the University of Bergen now can do this kind of studies. So, I wish you very good luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Then we have the next PhD candidate, Anders Rubing. And you have this title, Securing the Future, Resilient Cities in the Context of Migration. I must tell you a story here. And that is when you, or actually your supervisor, applied for this project, I was in the group who should evaluate this project. And I had to read it, I think 6 or 7 times before I understood what it was about. But because it's very difficult for people like me in the Faculty of Medicine to understand this kind of thing. But it's extremely interesting. That's what I wanted to say. So I look very much forward to listen to you.
Yes, maybe I can explain it so that I don't have to do it 6 times, I hope.
I know it now.
Yeah, that's good. So this is a collaboration between social anthropology and the Center for Women's and Gender Studies. And so there's the interdisciplinarity, and I also come from an interdisciplinary field. I'm an architect by training. And the main project is, as you see, Securing the Future, Resilient Cities in the Context of Migration. And my project there is to learn infrastructures of resilience and security. And for this event, I wanted to give an overview on the project and how we aim to unpack the underlying assumptions of resilience and security thinking in an urban context. And I will also say something about my field work and how resilience discussions have changed during this pandemic. And to begin, I want to share some of my fieldwork. This to show what kind of data we are collecting, and then I will try to explain the project as a whole. And since this is a UN celebration, I thought it would be appropriate to show this fieldwork that is from the World Urban Forum, that is UN Habitat's Biannual conference, where I were to look at how resilience and security was discussed there. UN Habitat is the UN branch that works with cities and human settlements, urbanization, and quoting from the website, promotes transformative change in cities and human settlements through knowledge, policy advice, technical assistance, and collaborative actions to leave no one and no place behind. And like resilience is one of the words that are used in this kind of conference. It's in fashion right now. It comes from both an ecological history with hulling and also like with the more designerly connotations. But what is similar with them is that they have a they break away from a modernist understanding of progress and the future, and this is what interests me. And one of the main themes of the World Urban Forum was the Sustainable Development Goals, and that this year we are moving into the decade of action to manage the goals until 2030. And this is one way of looking at progress. But simultaneously, there is a different within the resilience discussions. There's other ways of looking at progress and futures, and how nature, life, and humans interrelate, and with different understandings of what life consists of. So this is one example of diagrams that show this different, how resilience thinking changes, how we can think about progress in life. And after I came home from this fieldwork, all resilience practitioners, academics, and people working in the resilience field were, as me, stuck at home. And the pandemic, of course, changed part of the discourse. And like 4 weeks before at World Urban Forum, nobody within the resilience field that should look at shocks and catastrophes and how they change or how we can adapt and be ready for this didn't talk about pandemic. But now the discussion is changing to be recovering after the pandemic and doing this with resilience strategies. So going back to the project, we're interested in the semantics of resilience thinking, looking how resilience is mobilized to address complex urban security challenges. And these challenges differs when the resilient discourse change, but still, like migration is a key element, climate change, security, and now also resilient recovery from the pandemic. And like with this resilience-informed security measures, it is not clear-cut who is the enemy and what is the risk and who is the friend. But we believe that resilient thinking produces new forms of inequalities, racialized and gendered inequalities. And resilience is a governance strategy adapted to increasingly complex and insecure world, a world where the future is assumed to be truly uncertain and unpredictable. Like to make a simplification, one could say that there is a shift from earlier security governments, where they could construct scenarios and respond to them with a solution, to resilience as an idea of suggesting money and uncertainties and complex risks and adaptation rather than solution. And in addition, this is of course based on the knowledge that we have a limited knowledge of these risks and changing the way we see the world there. But resilience isn't one thinking, and especially in this conference, like the World Urban Forum, we see like different language from different organizations with different goals, how they relate to funding opportunities, social context, and so on. So we're using this diagram as our own tool to like look at resilience thinking and how it oscillates between transgression, stability, and governable and self-organizing life also, and here also non-human and non-organic life. We're looking at this like using infrastructure as a tool, and as infrastructure is topological and attuned to change, becoming impermanent and therefore oriented towards an uncertain future. And infrastructure is here understood as all the networks that flows that arrange the urban, and also within these, like following Keller Easterling, policy, mobility, and communication could also be looked at as one infrastructure. This approach is attuned to potential actions and inactions created by different infrastructural policies, technologies, and objects. And it is one tangible way to connect the activity and agency to the material structures, looking at infrastructure as a bearer of information. And between this information, its intent, capacities of activity residing in infrastructure, which exceeds its promoted functions and the physical functions, we find there is a kind of disposition between what is promoted and what is done. And we think that within this disposition, this gap between the information about the infrastructure and what it does, we can use this as an analytical tool. And various types of resilience thinking works differently within these kind of infrastructures. So to sum up, the concept of infrastructure disposition allows us to identify and integrate the potentialities of various styles of resilience thinking. And due to the topological nature of resilient thinking, the breakdown of binary, gendered, and racialized categories and topographical boundaries, it is often difficult to tell what is life building and what is attrition of human life in resilience-oriented urban security initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe there are some comments to, yeah, we have, let me take this off, I think. Carmelisa.
Yeah, I actually have two questions.
Yeah.
One is, so you're at the Center of Gender Studies. So I wanted to understand better how does gender come into your study. And the second one is the same that Bente asked in Mulu, which is your methods. So how are you getting your information from your
Yeah. So she asked for
Yes.
gender and methods. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the first, like I ended with, and also like I think like this kind of resilience thinking, it changes the kind of enemy-friend distinction in urban security policies, and we're looking at how this impact gendered and racialized populations in cities in a way. So that's the gender aspect of it. And
Sorry, I didn't understand that quite. Could you make it?
No, because this the resilient thinking is not a kind of, when we're looking at urban resilience and urban security. So this resilience thinking is not like there's not this kind of friend-enemy distinction that we have from before, but it's still we still think it affects kind of how we look at gendered and racialized communities within our cities in different ways. And these are the things that we're looking at.
Okay, so you think that when you think that thoughts you have related to gender in an area can be also related to other aspects in the city or in the resilient cities?
No, I didn't understand the question.
No, continue. You have to tell me.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, and like for methods, I'm looking at like international networks, so I'm following them, and doing a kind of discourse analysis on how they discuss resilience and security. So I'm following, like, in the World Urban Forum, there were many networks, but then we're following some of them throughout the project.
Okay. So, okay. Yeah. Any other comments? Then we ask you again, because is it so that the way people look at gender can have that you will look at that as it has any relation to how they look at other aspects of running a city, establishing a city, all these things?
Yes, not so much related to the project, but as an architect and as an urban scholar, I see that gender is very much a part of how we think about cities and how cities are organized.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting, because your supervisor, Randi Gresko, she comes from Center for Women's and Gender Research. Yeah? So this is very central in your project, I would imagine. Or you want to comment it, Randi?
You mean how gender is relevant to security, resilience thinking, or is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's of course we know that gender is central to how you plan city, how you think security. But what this project is more about is how notions of gender shifts when you start thinking in terms of resilience rather than more conventional approaches to security, where you have also conventional understandings of gender. So we try to see how perceptions of gender, understandings of gender and race, how they also shift when you shift the whole thinking around security. And I think that it's, of course, doing a discourse analysis like this is not going to say anything about what's going on in real life or in reality, but I still think it's immensely important to see how policies and policy discourses, how they contribute to how thinking around inequality, how the whole perception of the problem of inequality shifts.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, it's very interesting, this thing. We should elaborate on it at a later occasion. One more last question is, where will you do your study?
Yeah, and the studies are the international conferences. So now I'm kind of stuck in a digital conference world, looking at many Zoom videos, as it weren't enough within the everyday life. So yeah.
So that's where you will gather the data.
Yes.
And not analyzing any specific place.
No, and then maybe some places will turn up as we gather more data and we can go. Yeah. But for now, conferences.
Okay. Thank you very much. Then we have a third PhD candidate of this afternoon. We will have a talk about a project called Protein Intake and Nutritional Status of the Older Adults. And that's Theogene Habumugisha. And you are located at my workplace, the Center for International Health. So I see you often. Which faculties do you cooperate with otherwise, except from the medical one?
Faculty of Natural Science and Mathematics, specifically for the Department of Biological Science. and also faculties of Faculty of Humanities.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Well, please.
Excuse me, could you speak a little bit?
I'll do that. Yeah, we'll try. Oh, as Bint mentioned, my name is Kojen Hamugisha. I'm from Rwanda, and my background is human nutrition, and I'm one of our global challenges candidates. Currently, working title for my thesis is protein intake and nutrition status of the other adults. We are working under perspectives from healthy and sustainable dietary consumption. I have, as my project is interdisciplinary collaboration, I have a very interesting team across from those faculties I mentioned. I'm not come back to this because I already mentioned them. But as you can see, it's a very diverse team and a very interesting to work with them. So we are working toward contributing to different SDGs as well, including SDG number 2. Sorry. Number 2, number 12, number 15, and also we later discovered also we are working toward SDG number 17, which is enhancing partnership. So you may wonder why, you ask yourself why we're working under the framework of healthy and sustainable dietary consumption. There are many reasons for that, and many reasons for that. I will take you through some of the reasons. One of the reasons is increased high demand for food, both in terms of quality and quantity of food that is required. As you, many of you know, that the global population is projected to increase by the year 2050 up to 9 billion. So that means that we need to produce enough food to feed the increasing population. But also adding to that, also global population is increasingly becoming aging. So also that means that we have to produce food of good quality to cater for dietary needs of the increasingly aging population. I will come back to this later. There are other factors, including increasingly becoming scarce natural resources, environmental degradation and climate change, and also global burden of disease, including non-communicable diseases and double burden of malnutrition. But the main driver for many of these factors is meat production and consumption, which affect the scarcity of natural resources, climate change, and environmental degradation. It is evidence shows that meat production contributes to up to 30% of greenhouse gas emission that is released in the agricultural system. But of course, there is a discourse whether we should be focusing on production or consumption, because some people say that we should be focusing on production because that's where the high amount of CO2 is produced, new production, processing, and also transportation. But if you apply the rule of supply and demand, if you reduce demand, also the supply will be reduced. In that way, we believe that by targeting consumption, will contribute to lowering greenhouse gas emission that is related to livestock production or animal production and consumption. So other factors, as I mentioned, is global burden of disease, including NCDs, where meat consumption, especially red and processed meats, is contributing to different type of cancers and also cardiovascular disease as well. So here I will highlight some projected change in demographics, demographic changes, and also demand for meat or global foods in general. First, it is projected that in high-income countries, there will be little change in the population, while a huge change in the population is expected in developing countries or low and middle-income countries, where the population will increase from 5 to 7 billions by 2050. We also see that there will be change in demand for meats for consumption in different parts of the world, where still we see a real increase that is expected to come from developed countries. But when you see when you go to low and middle income countries, we see there will be huge increase in demand for meat consumption. There are many factors contributing to this, including the, as I mentioned, population growth, but also economic growth is not in those countries, where also middle class is increasing, and it is evident that as economic growth in a certain society, they shift from more plant-based diet to animal-rich diet. So in these countries, as those changes happen in those contexts, there is a project to increase the demand for meat consumption. Other important change that I want to mention is to highlight is the aging population. As you can see in this graph, here on the left-hand side, you see that these are population that will be aging over 60 years old. You see the blue area here represents developed countries, while the middle area represents low and middle income countries. You see that in the developed countries there will be little change, where in the global south, the countries that are located in the global south, that are low and middle income countries, there will be a huge increase in a population that is aged over 60 years old. Of course, this translates into a paradigm whether we should be reducing meat consumption, because meat is a good quality for different nutrients in terms of proteins and also micronutrients. So the question is how reduction of dietary meat consumption will affect the health of people. If we reduce meat consumption, what is going to happen to the health? But also another question is what will be the limits for meat consumption that are safe for human health and also for the environment itself, because we have to find trade-off between those aspects. So we have set different objectives. The first objective is to assess evidence on effect of reducing dietary meat consumption on nutritional status of the consumers. The second objective is to investigate the relationship between diet and indicators of nutrition and the environmental impact. The third objective is to explore consumer readiness towards reduction of dietary meat consumption. What do consumers think? Are they ready to reduce their meat consumption? So by approaching these objectives, we use different methodology. The first one is we do systematic review and meta-analysis. This is a classical way of evaluating evidence to see the effects that the reduction of dietary meat consumption will have on the health of the consumers. So on this method, we will be looking at the global perspective. We will not be limited to any country or context to see what will happen. But of course, we will do sub-analysis and see what will happen in different contexts. For the second study, we will do a population-based study, which will be conducted in Rwanda. Rwanda is a country in Africa, which is 15 times smaller than Norway, but it has more than 12 million of people, which is double of Norway, more than double of Norway. It's an interesting country also because it is increasingly urbanizing, and also the country is one of highest growing economy, has one of the highest growing economy in Africa. So there is complexity of those kind of things, population that we need to feed that is increasing, growing, and also all those kind of issues that related to development. To explore the readiness for the consumers, we'll use qualitative method, qualitative exploration, where we do a focus group discussion to discuss with people their experiences and opinion about dietary meat consumption, and hopefully we'll be able to tease out what are the facilitators and the barriers that will be targeted, or that should be targeted in the event of reducing dietary meat consumption. So reflecting to my project, as you have seen, my project is one of interdisciplinary projects which cross different disciplines. So far what you have learned, working in this environment is very interesting because you have people from different disciplines, and also they have a different perspective or different way of approaching problem. And it becomes interesting for us as learners and the trainees, because we can work with people who have different expertise, and it makes a room for to do better than we should do. We would do if we didn't have this collaboration. As I mentioned, also it gives you access to expertise. It's a good platform. You have expertise which you would not get if you didn't have this kind of broader collaboration between disciplines. Another factor is fostering future collaboration. As we reflect this, as me as a trainee, as a student, who's been trained, growing in this environment, it gives you a new perspective of looking at the problem, also and also the way you think about the solution. It's changed because you're exposed to different people who have different way of working, and also different expertise. So it's a good way. But also for the supervisors or the collaborators, when you work with them, you see how they are willing to change their way of working because everyone is coming from different tradition of research. So it's a good way to foster collaboration. Hopefully, we'll be able to break the barrier that has been hampering institutional collaboration, also research collaboration between researchers. So it's a good way that will be enhancing partnership. Finally, because it involves different disciplines and different people with different background, it needs more time to reflect on what you are doing and also discuss to hear everyone. Thank you. That was my last point.
Thank you very much, Theo. It's quite understandable, this thing with meat, you know. So maybe we have some comments from the audience this time. Yep, Astrid.
I'm just wondering, we all know that working interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, it's challenging and it often needs a lot of time. So the people that you have in your team, have they been used to working in a collaborative manner in this way? And how do you work now? Does the team spend a lot of time together? Do you actually manage to somehow fruitfully inform each other in terms of asking very different situated kinds of questions? Or is it more or less one discipline somehow dominating the discipline?
Astrid asks what about interdisciplinarity? How does it really work?
Yeah, she's watching when we are working. She's asking when we are working how it goes. First, they had a good way. They said before I joined the program, before they knew I was hired on this position, they set a framework for working. They said we are going to use medical methodology, but as I've seen, we have different also metrics. We'll be looking at environmental metrics. So we are also working with people from biology. So we have a framework for working, but also there is a time for other disciplines to come in to bring their expertise. So it's a way of it's structured, but also there's a room for other insights to come in as well.
Yeah, it's not so easy to work together like this. So it takes some time. You told that you think it will take longer time.
Yeah, it's take time in a way that because I need to understand. You need to hear what I think, to hear what you think. If we come in the same discipline, it's much easier. You don't need to understand what the method that other person is asking you or the way they are used to work.
Yeah.
But you need to understand everyone who is there and also hear the opinion, and also you together and as a research group, you have to agree on which is the best way to go. That's where it comes that you need some time.
Yeah. It sounds like a wise way of working in this situation, I would say. Yeah. Hibak.
Well,
Please.
as I understood, this is a type of new problem because of the population growth and me standing for the delusion that it does. What I didn't quite grasp is when you're doing your research on people over 60, what is the goal to see how this new lifestyle is affecting us? Is that what you're trying, or?
Most of the time in your research, you try to work with vulnerable population. Most of the time we work with pregnant and lactating women and under 5 years children, because those groups, they have high requirements for nutrients, for quality nutrients. So once you make sure that the vulnerable group is covered, you don't have to bother the other group, because if the vulnerable group is covered, also the other groups, there will be, you are sure that there will be no problem for the other groups. In this case, we picked the elderly people or the other people because they have high requirements for protein. because as people grow older, there is natural loss, which is natural loss for muscle mass. So the muscle mass decreases progressively, and you cannot remedy that. But what you can do if you feed people with high quality protein and increase exercise, it slows down the process of wasting their muscle mass. So in this way, and also in this way, if we reduce meat consumption, it will affect proteins. So that's why we picked that group. It's very relevant to study this this particular issue.
Good. And Carmelisa.
What I was curious about, you have that model related to developing countries and developed countries and how they will increase their population. And I was wondering if the model takes into account that maybe some developing countries will become developed countries along that time. And that means also that there will be a reduction in the way the population grows, which has been common.
Come again, taking account whether developing countries will become or
Developed countries, in the mix, some of them, not all of them.
to become developing.
Developing countries will become developed countries.
Yes.
Until 2050. And that means that the trend of population growth changes also.
Well,
Not just
that's
that people consume more meat, but they also have less children.
yeah, that's a good question. By now, we are, as you have seen, there are 2 points. There is increased population growth, but also there is increase in a older population. If they shift from many kids to few kids, less kids, and also but population there, it will be growing older, means we will need high quality diet to feed that population. So in that way, it's it's balanced, yeah.
Okay. Any more questions? No, it's fine. We'll continue with some nutrition, but thank you very much, Theo. Thank you. For the next presentation, I'm not sure that the slides can be seen by the audience outside the room, but can we? Yeah, we can. Okay, we will organize it. And but anyway, the presentation is called "Small Fish for Small Children: Dietary Intake of Small Fish to Reduce Child Nutrition in Uganda." And it's Professor Ragnhild Overå who will present this from the Faculty of Science.
Social science.
Social Science and Department of Geography. Yeah, and you are a supervisor in this project.
Hopefully I will be.
We'll try to find it.
Mens jeg har det. Nei. Jeg har lyst til å ta.
Small fish to roast one.
Der, ja. Kan jeg bare bytte en slide?
Det kan du ikke.
Nei, ok, det er slutt. Det går greit.
Okay, please.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, thank you. My name is Ragnhild Overå. I'm a professor in human geography, and I'm part of a very interesting group that has submitted this project proposal. And we are from the Faculty of Social Sciences, from the Department of Biology, that is Jeppe Kolding, and we are from the medical faculty. Ingunn Engebretsen, who is sitting here, is part of it, and Torkil Tilleskjær and Anna Hatley. And we have also Marianne Kjellevold from the Institute of Marine Sciences and Margaret Masette from Uganda National Laboratory of Agriculture, something like that. So we are nutritionists, medical doctors, human geographers, and fisheries biologists. So it's really a multidisciplinary team. And we have not yet employed the PhD student who will be conducting the project. We had interviews with 5 out of 86 applicants last week. So we hope to select the person maybe next week. Yeah. So, but I will just present a little bit about the background for the project and end up with the research objectives, and yeah, that's how we'll do it. So we all know that the first 1,000 days of life is extremely important when it comes to nutrition for the development of the child from conception until the child is 2 years old. But the days after the 1,000 days of life are also very important, and child growth continues and brain development continues for the next 7,000 days beyond that. When children are stunted, which means that they are shorter than they should be for their age, that is one sign of severe malnutrition. So this kind of school-going age between the being a very small child to being of reproductive age is extremely important. And so we are focusing on that period. There are many societal consequences of having too little nutrition, from child mortality to economic considerations for the country, you know. There is a severe economic consequences when children are not having the best physical and brain development. And in the country Uganda that we are focusing on, there are 25% of the children who are under the 5 years of age who are stunted. 53% are anemic and at risk of not reaching their full mental and physical potential. And 1 in 3 school children have no food to eat during the school day. And that's also one of the high reasons for high dropout rates, of course. So this is some background for the topic. So we have this, what we call vitamin bears, the small fish. These are tiny, tiny fish of this size that you find in abundance in marine, in the ocean and in lakes and rivers. They are full of vitamins and minerals like vitamin A, vitamin D, zinc, calcium, iron, yeah, etc. So they are really good if to you know, just eating 1 small fish like this per day will give you enough of most of these nutrients that you need. And they are especially in poor countries, often consumed whole, so that they are consumed with bones and viscera and the eyes. Especially the eyes contain enormous amounts of vitamin A. They can be mixed in small quantities in the local cuisine. And this is very often done. And there is also quite a lot of such fish available in marketplaces, as here in Uganda. This map is showing that inland small fish species, like especially the daga, which is as it is called in Tanzania, but in Uganda it's the same fish, is called mukene. It's distributed very widely around in the region. So it is extremely, this fishery is extremely important for food security in the region, Eastern and Southern Africa. But of course there are many factors that are inhibiting also the access of poor communities and households to the fish. For example, there is a growing aquaculture industry and the growing, it's interesting with the growing meat consumption in the African middle class as well. where this fish is very popular as a feed ingredient. So you have big companies coming in, buying up this fish, which makes it more expensive and less available for poor consumers. That's one of the challenges. Yeah. So there are factors, and there are also very strict fisheries regulations, often where fisher folks who are fishing this fish are prevented from actually catching it, even though it regenerates extremely quickly, so that, in fact, biologically, there is no reason why to actually go in and fish it with very small mesh sizes, as local fishermen do. And there are a lot of infrastructure problems and legislative problems also in the fish market that inhibit access to this fish. So, so this is the context, but what the project will focus on is, and which we don't know enough about when it comes to small fish, because it's really not much studies. The role of small fish in diets is very underrated in a way, both economically and nutritionally. So we wish to study what kind of access or role does small fish play in the diets or in poor households, and also what role could small fish play in schools, in school feeding programs. And we are placing the project here in northern Uganda, in Gulu and Arua. Yes, so this is where it will take place, in communities that are rather far located from water bodies and from the source of the fish. So this PhD project then, this is just taken from the project proposal, you know. It's not, I will be one of the supervisors, but it will be the PhD student's task to do this. And the project will address the potential of upscaling interventions with small fish products. I mean, not small fish products, but small fish products, products made of small fish, through school meals to combat child malnutrition in selected rural poor households in northern Uganda. And the main overarching objective then is to what extent and in which ways is small fish included in children's diets in low-income households, and what are the potentials and barriers for enriching school diets with small fish products. There are many societal barriers there. So then we have three sub research objectives, which is the first is to examine. This will be like a household survey, where the PhD candidate is going to look into fish consumption in households, using food frequency questionnaires and things like that, to find out about things, and looking more qualitatively also at processes within the households and in the context of the households, to examine how economic, legislative, environmental, and sociocultural factors affect children's fish access at home and in school, and assess the importance of small fish in their overall diets. And then we will go into the schools and assess the acceptance and consumption of small fish processed into low-cost products like deep-fried, smoked, sun-dried, fermented, and milled. We have some very good people to collaborate on who are developing such products that will be tested in schools among 6 to 12-year-old school children. And then to examine the available models for distribution and marketing of small fish products to low-income and vulnerable groups for improved nutrition in households and school feeding programs. Yeah, so those were what it's about, and this is the team of supervising institutions, as I mentioned in the beginning. I mentioned the names of those involved, I think, and also that the project comes out of this project, the Small Fish Food Project, which is a Horizon 2020 project, part of the LEAP Agri research programs, long-term collaborations between the European and African countries on food security and nutrition. And also there is another smaller project based in Uganda, which the project will also collaborate with, which is funded by IFAD. So yeah, I think I'll stop there. Okay, thank
you. Thank you very much. What do the audience think? Are there questions or comments to this interesting project? I think the project is quite innovative because you will look at fish where there is no water. I mean, just to figure it out, it's a good idea, but probably you have been thinking of this a lot in the nutritional world, I don't know, that you look at the fish consumptions in areas without water.
Yeah. Well, there could be a little bit of, that will be one of the things to actually find out. One thinks that people do not fish often, but sometimes they actually do, in small streams and places and irrigation dams, etc. nearby. So there could be some local access to fish even in such areas. But of course, mostly what comes through the market will be most important in such areas.
Okay, Astrid, would you?
Two main questions. There's no one. Just very basic questions. First of all, are these tiny fish, are they both saltwater fish at the ocean and also found in freshwater lakes? That is one thing. And then I wonder, of course, having worked many years in East Africa, we know that we can go 10 minutes in one direction, half an hour in another direction, and you will find ethnic groups that absolutely define fish as non-food altogether, and other places fishing is the thing in life. So I would think that you have some expectations. Now, would you not build it up as like a comparative kind of thing? Why would you only go into a northern Ugandan case where wouldn't a comparative kind of project make sense?
Yeah. Well, the first question is, as I said, you can find such small fish species, of course, in all kinds of aquatic environments like sardines and anchovy, etc., that we know from the marine environment, but also in freshwater. And in Uganda, being an inland landlocked country, although there is some fish imports from the marine world, I mean, usually, in the local domestic market, it's locally caught freshwater species mainly. Yeah, on the comparative aspect, that could have been a very interesting. I mean, we haven't really decided exactly which households will take part in the survey yet, but it certainly is. There are great local variations, as you say, in food culture, and also in livelihoods, of course. So that is yet to be found out. Exactly which groups will be studied.
You can do more studies. Then there's Israel, Paul.
Yeah, my first question has been answered. Thank you very much. Because practice is a little big aspect when it comes to feeding practice in different communities. And I do understand that feeding practice also has some guideline in some countries. The age you have just mentioned is like 6 to 12 years. We expect this kind of students to be in primary school. And there is, in some countries, like in Tanzania, there is a policy for feeding this kind of children. So I was wondering if there is any in Uganda that describes, because we are used to beans and a sort of kind of. So I never found any mentioning about small fish. And I have grown up in Lake Victoria. I have to admit that. Also, the practice around this is not the best, it's an alternative. We find a family that usually check this as a staple food. They don't have access to the usual, I mean, the tilapia and the other kind of fish. So maybe, but it is an interesting topic, very interesting study that maybe we have to uncover. But I also have to say this is very important. If we can make changes with the results that are coming out, it might help very much in nutrition status for kids. Thank you very much.
Child feeding practices will of course be part of studying what they are doing in the households and the extent to which they have learned that from maybe maternal health programs or other public programs. I don't know if they are. I don't know whether they include a specific focus on small fish in those guidelines. We'll find out. I know from my research in Ghana that there are actually there are advice to mothers of feeding with fish powder to mix it into child porridge, for example, from the age of 6 months. So, but not really so much focusing on the particularly nutritious, high nutrition that there is in the small fish species. And as you said, it's mainly poor people's food. And as I said, that's one of the reasons why this type of fish is very underrated. It's not considered to be a very nice thing, even, it's just like something you have to buy if you can't afford better fish like tilapia but in fact these fish are much more nutritious than tilapia. So if one can also then educate and not the least school caterers also, about how big the effect can be of including just very little, it will be very useful.
Yes, please, Muluk.
Perfect, thank you. So school meals is part of the study. What is the likelihood of school meals continuing? Because in some countries, due to economic restructuring, subsidy to school meals is being challenged. And this is dependent, the work is dependent on this continuing. So I wonder how established and the likelihood of this continuing in Uganda.
Oh, I really don't know what the, I mean, of course, not at all school children have access to school meals, which is a big challenge in itself. And also with COVID-19, we know that these school feeding programs and school going at all is being affected. So how this will actually, I think this is not, we will try to inform about how important school meals can be. I suppose that will be the role of the project. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ragnhild. And we look forward to see how it works with this PhD candidate.
Yes.
Yeah, good luck. Now we come to the last part of this program, and that's a comment. We asked Professor Bjørn Inge Bertelsen from the Faculty of Social Sciences to summarize a little bit and comment on the role of research at University of Bergen when it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals. So please, Bjørn Inge, we'll try to find your presentation too.
Thank you very much. I heard many iterations about what I was supposed to do, so this was the last one, so but we'll see how it works. Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
Thank you. I realize I am the person standing between us all and something to eat, and I also got quite hungry listening to Ragnhild talk about the small fish. I've eaten a lot of this small fish in Mozambique. We've done rural field work, so this is why I also look forward to food afterwards. I am the executive director of something called the Global Research Program on Inequality, which I'll return to. I was given the task, in quotation mark, comment on the role of research at UIB towards the SDGs. Yeah. And anyone would understand this to be quite a momentous task. I think the work with the SDGs, and especially the work, if you enlarge it to Agenda 2030, permeates almost all aspects of research at UIB today. And I think any sort of grand listing of which research environments, etc., work most closely with this would be a bit faulty. And I will therefore just today exemplify by two initiatives that haven't been spoken about yet today, and that's the Global Research Program on Inequality and the Sdg Conference at Bergen, which is held annually. But before doing that, I would also like to say that I think it was very instructive to listen to all of the PhD students today that were here, Mulu, Andrews, and Theo. I think all of them, in a sense, indicate the level of engagement with the SDGs and also Agenda 30 at the University of Bergen. And I think in all of them, there is this willingness to also critically engage the SDGs and Agenda 2030. In Mulu's work, it was, in a sense, this was how I interpreted it anyway, to also interrogate what is accountability in a context like the one you're working in. In Anders' work and Theo's work, it is in a sense to interrogate how does development look in a post-modernist era, yeah? I mean, we can't consume the level of meat we continue to consume. We can't govern cities in the way we used to think. This is sort of a post-progress kind of perspective. And this is the kind of radical imperative that is also part of the 2030 and SDG agenda. And I think all of you perfectly illustrated that. And this is the kind of fuel that we also like to think that we work with in GRIP. And so what is GRIP, the Global Research Program on Inequality? Well, it was established in 2019. It comes out of the long-standing and very important work at the University of Bergen on poverty, in the Comparative Research Program on Poverty that was established in 1992. It is a collaboration between the University of Bergen and the International Science Council, which is the world's largest science organization based in Paris. So it's cross-disciplinary, transdisciplinary. And it was established to a large part because the University of Bergen realized that, okay, if we want to work with inequality, if we want to work with Agenda 2030 and the SDGs, we need to acknowledge also that there are large global shifts going on concerning knowledge and concerning also forms of inequality. And this relates, of course, to changing global power relations. We can no longer speak about a sort of a bipolar world in terms of the US or Russia in the old era. and now we have China as well, of course. And also it is quite difficult to talk about the North and the South as two hard, as two very distinct bodies. And we also went back to Agenda 2030, which asks researchers to identify trigger points from where to think about transformation. Yeah? So this is a clear starting point. And we also would like to work with the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs beyond, in a sense, technocratic solutions, because it is very easy to latch onto specific SDGs, specific sub-targets, specific indicators, and reduce it to a huge template, a matrix that you can subscribe to and that you can work a bit with, yeah, and see it as a machine. Yeah, but we think the role as researchers is and has to be to step back and critically think about this as well. All right. Another kind of inspiration for the Global Research Program on inequality is to shift the balance between what we used to think of as the centers of knowledge, yeah, in the metropolitan north very often. And we identify that we need to co-construct knowledge with also centers of knowledge and centers of epistemologies outside, well, Europe and North America, for instance. Yeah. So we work very, very actively with that. Okay, we have a few objectives. And we focus on interdisciplinary research program. We were established, blah, 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 blah. I've said all that. Okay, we go on. These are the objectives, sorry. It's late in the day. I long for the fish and I long for the food afterwards. So we work with 6 interrelated dimensions of inequality, and you can read them up there: economic, social, political, cultural, environmental, and knowledge-based. And the knowledge-based returns to this notion of needing to go beyond Europe and North America, not just as sources of data, but sources where knowledge is produced, theories are produced. And we look specifically at urban context because the world is becoming urban. And we want to produce actionable and relevant research, contributing to impact and transformation. This means that we have 2 research modalities, you could say, we would like to understand. That is the classical role of research, to understand, to probe critically, and to address, that is to engage in a practical way. In working with this since 2019, of course, the pandemic has dawned upon us all. So what we did in that time to try to practice some of this was to actually look at, okay, how has COVID-19 affected inequality? And we asked activists, researchers, experts across the world about this, and we produced a mini-series who work from their perspective to try to make sense of how has inequality been transformed. So we asked, for instance, Divine Fu, who gave the following answer, which I really enjoy, actually. It directs our attention to care and the importance of care. We asked Professor Sakiko Fukudapar from the New School, who critically interrogated in her piece how health can be thought outside the market, or the need to think outside the market in terms of health, and also well-being. And we went to the Pacific Ocean, and perhaps Camilla here can pronounce the name of our interlocutor. I would say Felo Akitau Kao Tevi. Tevi, yes, okay. Tevi, short. And he asks us all to go back to a more human-centric understanding. And we think this is important to go outside, to look at these things, to be inspired, to rethink how one can think about transformation. Okay. So this is one way in which the SDGs are engaged at the University of Bergen, in addition to everything else that has been presented there today. Another important venue, you could say, for the SDGs at the University of Bergen is the annual Sdg Conference. This is held every year. It's going to be held next year in February. It has been organized every year since 2018, and you could say the University of Bergen has taken a key role in working with the SDGs actually at the university level in Norway. So the University of Bergen is a leader. And the Sdg Conference is organized around the nexus of science, policy, and action. Yeah? So this is not just sitting aloof, sitting afar, looking at the SDGs. It is engaging these, in a sense. And the central questions at the SDG 2021 are these. I won't read them to you. You can read them all by yourself. But they are concerned with understanding how can we rethink, or should we rethink, or is it possible to rethink the SDGs after the pandemic, and taking into account the ways in which inequalities have been transformed by the pandemic. So I would invite you all to look up the conference, to also look up the day zero, which is happening the day before the conference, which is a festival-like fantastic event, which is open to all, which has just made a call open for panels and seminars, and to follow this. And also in the middle of November, the program will be ready, and there will be some, I can divulge because I am heading the program committee, there will be some interesting people announced. Okay, so I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Björn, for all this interesting information. And you also told that now you're thinking too much about fish and meat and things. And so I think we all do, because normally we would have a longer conference with a lot of breaks. That's our system. But in this Corona situation, we decided to have a short conference and no breaks to avoid any problem with the contamination of anyone or whatever. But we do invite you to go outside this room and find some tea, coffee, and something to eat outside, and stay for a little chat with someone. But please keep the 1 meter distance, so we don't risk anything for your health. And thank you so much for all your presentations and comments today, and for the streaming activity and everything. I am very happy. And I looked actually at the UN page today, the central UN page. I mean, they are 75 years, they should say something. And they just state that global issue is affecting us all. And I think that's what we need to know at all times. Thank you very much.